Welcome, everyone. I'm Donna Sorkin. I'm the Executive Director of the American Cochlear Implant Alliance. And thank you for joining us tonight for this very special event. We have expanded our conference attendees with a number of special guests from the area. And we're very delighted that they could be with us to help us launch this very special film. And I wanted to just acknowledge our special guests from our sister organizations in the region. We have Barbara Kelly here from Hearing Loss Association of America, Emilio Alonso Mendoza from A.G. Bell Association for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, Arlene Biantron from American Speech Language Hearing Association, and Tanya Tolpagren from American Academy of Audiology. I think I've messed up her name. So with this, we're going to begin our special events, and I think many of you here tonight already know Dr. Jane Madell, and you're familiar with her extraordinary career as an audiologist. It's a career that has been devoted to helping children and adults with hearing loss and their families, a life work that spans nearly 5 decades. Her life work has also included training others. And for you that know her, she needs no introduction. So my job is to try and do justice to this spectacularly committed and talented individual for the rest of you. I met Jane 20 years ago when she came up to me at a conference and introduced herself saying, "I think we should be friends. I will help you." Do you remember this? So being friends with Jane means you benefit from her talent, energy, and drive for excellence. It also means she holds you accountable for doing the same. She's difficult in a good way. The children and families Jane guided over the years were each given a unique gift, the ability to develop and thrive despite hearing loss. Her optimism and belief in the power of parents and the abilities of children has always shined through. Jane, thank you for taking on this film project, allowing all of us to share your life's work through these marvelous young people with the larger world.
Thank you. As Donna said, I've been doing this for 50 years. It's hard to actually believe that since I'm really only 11. But this film is just a treasure to me. I write a blog, the Hearing Health Matters blog. I write the Hearing in Kids part of the Hearing Health Matters blog. And a few years ago, I was running out of things to write in the blog. And I decided I would start to contact some of my old kids and sort of see how they were. And I mean, I knew sort of how they were, but what I really wanted from them was what kind of advice they would give to families of newly identified kids, because they have information that the rest of us can't possibly have. So I decided I would do that, and I started to make contact with them. Now, these kids, everybody in this film was identified before newborn hearing screening. So they didn't get identified at birth. They got identified when people noticed that they weren't developing speech and language. And they all were identified before cochlear implants. So nobody here got cochlear implants as a baby. They didn't get them until later. So they haven't had the best possible access to audition that babies identified now have, as some of them will talk about in the film. But they have, they have one, they're just wonderful people. I had a wonderful time dealing with them. And then when I started thinking about how to do this, I had a friend who's Irene Taylor Brodsky, who is a world-renowned documentary filmmaker. And I got to know Irene when she and her husband Matt brought their son Jonas to me to see whether I thought he should get a cochlear implant. And then a few years later, like 6 or 7 years later, I went and did a workshop in Portland, Oregon, where they live, and they came to the workshop, and I took one look at Irene, and I thought, she can help me collect this information. And I told her what I was thinking about, and she said, let's do it. So that's what we did. This is an independent film, and Irene asked me to explain to you what an independent film is. An independent film means that the filmmakers, in this case, Irene and me, are the only people who have any editing rights. Nobody else told us what to put in and what to take out. We did it by ourselves. We, needless to say, had to find some money to do this, and we were very fussy about where we would get our money because we didn't want to get money from anybody who we thought would want to tell us how to make this movie. We were very fortunate that the Oberkotter Foundation thought making this movie was a good idea, and so they helped us, and they enabled us to get this done. Thank you. You will find out, just this week, we've arranged distribution. You will find information about that on your postcard. It says the listeningprojectfilm.org, and that will help us get you the information about how to get the film. The film comes in 2 versions, the full version, which you're seeing tonight, and a short version to go to schools, so that families, kids with hearing loss, can take this with them to schools and help the other kids in their schools and the faculty understand more about what it's like to live with a hearing loss nowadays with the technology that we have. So this film is about listening with technology. It's about listening. So we want to listen to what's possible with technology, and we also want to listen to what these kids have to say. So it's 2 listenings. I want to read a note from Irene, who asked me to read the following to you. Dear esteemed guests, I'm sorry I cannot be with you this evening for the premiere of the Listening Project. For me, this is more than a film. It has been a journey into the heart of hearing loss with 17 truly extraordinary people, all of whom took a great risk to talk so intimately with us about what it was like to be them. As the daughter of 2 deaf people born in the 1930s and the mother of a 21st century deaf child who plays the piano, very well, by the way, I have seen up close and very personally how a TTY, a smartphone, or a cochlear implant can change a life. My sincerest thanks go to my partner, Jane. We believe that the people in this film will help us enter a new era of dialogue about the deaf experience. With technology, they have listened to us. I welcome you now to listen very closely to them. Thank you. They're the stars. I want to tell you, I was a little nervous about this, but they haven't seen the movie until tonight. I didn't know what was going to happen. Irene, who is the filmmaker, I did the interviewing, but Irene is the filmmaker. And Irene said she wouldn't let anybody, she didn't want them to see it until they closed. Oh, wait, sit down. People can't read the captions. Thank you, Irene. And so she didn't want them to see it until the movie. I was worried because Lizzie cried, and I didn't know what she'd think about crying. I'll tell you, when we were doing this, we did this in our living room in Brooklyn. And Lizzie started to cry, so me being, the Earth Mother, gets up to run over to hug Lizzie. And Irene comes up to me and just, she's sitting next to me, puts me down and said, and she's shaking her head. No, and she's crying. I can't leave her sitting there. I mean, I've known her since she was 2. I can't leave her sitting there crying. And I said, could I just give her tissues? No. So everybody had to sort of get through it. And so Susan Kornfeld is first, Lizzie Bonagora, Jake Spinowitz, Amy Pollack, and Shahzad Zaman. These were the ones who could make it to Washington. That when we had this big snowstorm last week, Shahzad wasn't sure he was going to get here from Boston, and I actually wrote to Amy and told her she might be here by herself because she actually lives in DC, and I knew she would manage to do it. Okay, so we are here for questions. Anybody who has anything they want to ask us, come up to a microphone, and anything anybody wants to say, think, whatever. It is true we want to hear from them, right? Whatever.
I just wanted to thank you all for sharing such a personal story with all of us who you don't even know. Thank you very much for that.
She took the words right out of my mouth. My daughter is 6 years old, and she was implanted right before she was 2. And just seeing how successful you guys are and how you cope with everything that was thrown at you, it just gives me so much hope as a mom.
Thank you.
This was beautiful. Thank you. I'd like to know at what age you were implanted, because this was before newborn hearing screening. So I'd like to just get an idea of what ages you were implanted.
Okay, let me just make something clear. Not everybody has an implant, but 4 of the kids in the film still have hearing. Of the 15 kids, 4 are still wearing hearing aids, but I'll let them all talk about when were you implanted. Susan, do you want to?
Yep, I'll start off. So I wear hearing aids in both ears. I had a severe hearing loss, and I got them when I was 18 months old. So around that time, my parents thought that something was wrong. I wasn't hearing in the way that my brother was. And that's when they brought me to Jane, and I was promptly fitted with hearing aids, and I still wear them today.
I initially wore hearing aids on both sides. I was diagnosed around 2-ish. I have a twin sister. My parents realized that I was not keeping up with her, and that's when I met Jane. And I had hearing aids up until the time I'm bilateral hearing aids until I was 22. And after I graduated from college at 22, I ended up getting implanted on the right side, which was my weaker side. But I still have a hearing aid on the left.
Okay, when was this Cochlear implant first recommended for you? Lizzie gave me more trouble than any other kid I've ever worked with. And you can imagine how many kids I've worked with in 50 years. She was the worst. It took me 8 years to get her to wear an implant.
Approximately 8 years of intensive hounding.
Right, yeah.
And I finally gave in, and now I'm hearing about the other side. We'll see.
Right. She needs an implant on the other ear. Could we all have a little? Okay. Okay, Jake, your turn.
So I think I was diagnosed when I was about 1 year old, and I wore hearing aids. Severe to profound hearing loss, and I wore hearing aids up until I was about 15, so freshman in high school. And then all my hearing just kind of vanished overnight for a reason that I'll call some medical expert to explain to you. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah. So Jane was obviously a huge advocate for cochlear implants, so I kind of knew right away what the next step was. So I was 15 when I got it.
I had hearing aids from the time I was a baby. I'm from a deaf family, so my parents, were kind of on the lookout since I was born. So I had them at a very early age, and I was fine with hearing aids. I had no intention of getting a cochlear implant until I was 27. I was smack dab in the middle of grad school. And I woke up one day, and I couldn't hear anything. Same thing. Complete overnight sudden hearing loss in one ear. So I fast-tracked myself for the implant. I was 27. And actually, Jane went to bat for me because I was living in Atlanta at the time. And I failed, meaning I passed, the hearing test. Because they didn't do the test right, and I knew it. They gave me the same words that I've been hearing: baseball, ice cream, airplane, since I was 2 years old. I couldn't help it. I wasn't going to lie. So I actually went to New York, and I said, Jane, they won't give me an implant. She said, let me handle this. And then I got the implant at 27.
So I was diagnosed when I was 18 months old. The funny thing is, my mother was a pediatric resident when I was, a newborn, and you would think that she would notice some things a little bit sooner than the average person. But she was so busy, and it was not until I was 18 months old when I was diagnosed. I got my first cochlear implant when I was 18 years old, when I was about to start my senior year in high school. And I became bilateral about 6 years ago. In my other year, when I was 30, I was in my second year of medical residency, and I was having a hard time with background noise during teaching rounds, and that's when I decided to get a second implant. So 18 was the first one, and 30 was when I was my second. In hindsight, I would have gotten them both at the same time, knowing how much benefit it gave me.
Irene.
Okay. Hi, Jane.
Hi,
This is
Irene.
a beautiful movie. I really loved it. I'm sorry that my son is not in the movie, but
I'm sorry, too. He was too busy. I just want to say, I invited him, but he was too busy. He's a rabbi in a hearing congregation in Boston, and he couldn't come to New York for the weekend.
that's absolutely right. But Jane, you still have to work on him because he won't get a cochlear implant. So good luck with your next challenge.
I really have tried.
Okay, the movie was beautiful, but I would like to make one correction. One of the participants in the movie, the medical doctor, said that if she was signing and not speaking, she would never be a doctor. I know personally deaf people who do not speak, who use only sign language, and who are medical doctors working nowadays. So I just want to make sure that this misconception does not get out. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene.
Yeah,
Where?
I happen to know two of those physicians, and what they've done is incredible. Doing sign language and having an interpreter on site to help them with teaching rounds and rotations. My philosophy is anybody can do anything in this world, whether you're deaf, blind, or hearing. As long as you believe in yourself, anybody can do anything.
Hello. Thank you so much for the movie. It was really great. I was born with a hearing loss, and I got hearing aids probably when I was in my early 20s because I realized I was just missing too much. And I just wanted to, I kind of wish the Peace Corps volunteer were here because I also served in the Peace Corps, and I was in Burkina Faso, West Africa. Thank you. I don't know if that warrants applause, but and so I do speak French. But I actually I don't mean to be critical of Peace Corps, but my hearing aid broke twice when I was in West Africa, and there were a lot of inappropriate comments that were made about how I shouldn't be there. Even the Peace Corps medical officer, who's the Peace Corps doctor, had said that, maybe you really, volunteers who are hearing impaired shouldn't be serving in West Africa. Even the American country director had made some inappropriate comments. And so I've actually been lobbying a lot on the Hill for Peace Corps reform surrounding like the healthcare treatment of Peace Corps volunteers in the field. And when we return, and we're at bare minimum right now, but at one point I would like to actually speak more to this issue, especially in an international environment. It would be really interesting to do a country comparison surrounding the technological advances. For example, in Europe, there are a lot more movies that are closed captions. In some countries, such as the Scandinavians, they're very progressive. But French countries, I speak French, but there are very few closed captioned movies in French, just with the French captions, et cetera. So it would be interesting to continue the dialogue and to have more conversations. So thank you, everybody, for being here.
Well, Rachel is not here tonight because she's on an airplane going to Belgium right now. But I'll tell her.
That's awesome. More of us should be in the international community.
Right.
Hi, I'm Jan, and I'm a Cochlear implant audiologist and in California. And I'm wondering for the doctors if you can give me some suggestions on how to counsel patients who want to go into medical practice about technologies that you use that allow you to communicate better with your patients or in operating rooms or other difficult listening environments.
So I think it really depends on the person, and it depends on their hearing loss, it depends on their field. In terms of like the technology that they use, I use a regular cardiac Littman stethoscope that's just the same one. I take my hearing aid out and I use that, and it works for me, but I'm also an OBGYN, so I'm not listening to heart all that much. But for me, but I'm a surgeon, so on the other flip side of that, I spend a lot of time in the operating room, and I don't do elective surgeries. I do scheduled C-sections, emergency C-sections, are very chaotic. And regardless of whether it's elective or not, everyone wears a mask, and so I can't lip read. And then that was a big challenge for me in medical school, and then in residency it's easier now as an attending where I'm kind of running the show and I'm the point of communication. But I think in terms of counseling and advice to give to people who are interested in medicine or interested in those fields is really to speak up. It's not so much a specific technology that everyone should have. It's really to speak up. Like, where are you struggling? Where do you need help? I mean, I had to sit down when I was a second-year medical student. My medical school was not particularly helpful, but they were responsive. They didn't know what to do with me, but they were certainly responsive. But I very much had to take the bull by the horns and get everyone in a room and say, look, like, I'm going into my clinical years. These are, and Jane helped me with this, and everyone who knows me helped me with this. This is what I anticipate being a problem. These are what I think, these are solutions I think could help. What ideas do you guys have? Let me tell you why I struggle. And that was really helpful in making it a two-way street, but I certainly had to run the show. I mean, I very much had to stand up for myself, and that was true in residency as well, and that's also true now as an attending. And Jane and I were talking earlier, when I started my job, every single person I met, every anesthesiologist, every nurse, every social worker, everybody. Hi, I'm Lizzie Bonadeur. I have a hearing impairment, just so you know. If you need to yell at me, you need to wave your hand, whatever you need to do, I'm not ignoring you. Sometimes I might ask for help. That, above all, has been the thing that's been the most helpful. And I found that lots of people have all different types of suggestions. But in terms of specific technology, I think it really depends on what field you're in, what you're doing on a regular basis, what your hearing loss is, because I know several physicians who use more specific special stethoscopes, people who, they choose different fields because certain things are difficult for them. I just think it's very individual, but the biggest thing is really to speak up for yourself.
When Lizzie and I were talking, she was in New York at Christmas time, and she asked whether to be put in touch with other people who were physicians who were doing this. And I asked Jake's brother, who's an ENT, if he could give, what his suggestion was. And he said he uses an FM system in the operating room. He has an FM microphone hanging down in the middle of the operating room, and, everybody's got it, and that works for him. So Lizzie's right. It depends on the kid. Do you have, Shahzad, you want to add something?
Yeah, to answer your question, my recommendation would be to be proactive. try to meet with the professors, a week or two before the start of every rotation, which is what I did. I went to a small school up in Maine. I had the choices of going to some other schools with a bigger name to it, but I felt like I had to do a little more negotiation in terms of services. In my second year of medical school, before I started to do my third year surgery rotation, I was fortunate that my school was able to arrange a one-day trial where I scrubbed in on 3 different surgeries using 3 different communication methods. One was a FM microphone. The second one was a clear surgical max, which of course kept fogging up, during the operation, which made it a little bit harder to lip read. The third option was using a sign language interpreter. And it was really interesting to hear the feedback that I was getting from some of the surgeons. They had some concerns about the interpreter because they could not verify that the information that was being communicated was accurate. And I also wanted to be able to look at the anatomy, at the dissection during the procedure and not look at an interpreter too. But the key point is to be proactive and know your limitations, what you can or can't do. I love emergency medicine. I love the challenge of 15 minutes of something new, because I've had a challenge my whole life that I'm trying to deal with, and but I know that the emergency room is very noisy. It can be very chaotic, especially with the trauma situation. So urgent care is perfect for me because it's outpatient, very one-on-one, one-on-two, very minimal background noise, and I'm able to use most of my skills without accommodations. But the key point is to be proactive and take advantage of the resources available to you as well.
Good evening. Thank you again, echoing the other comments. Thank you for being here and sharing your story. I'm the father of a 2-year-old little girl who was diagnosed 3 weeks after birth of being profoundly deaf. She was implanted at 7.5 months by the wizard commonly known as Dr. Brian Riley at Children's National Medical Center. And she is thriving now as a 2-year-old. A lot to do with my amazing wife who's over there, but also the folks at the River School in DC who are sitting over here, who are amazing, amazing people. So selfishly, though, I would just like some kind of some guidance for some parents here in the audience. We've got some folks with us as well, of things that your parents did really well for you as you were growing up, and then some things they didn't do so well for you as well. So any guidance for us would be well received. Thank you.
We all probably
Jake, did you want to go ahead, Jake?
I'll take a stab at it. So my parents, they're not here right now. I hope they don't see a recording of this after. But yeah, no, I mean, I'll be honest. I honestly don't have too much, kind of, I don't look at it really in a negative light. I think when you're younger, when you're a child, doing anything to try and kind of like confine your attention to something you consider work is tough. We all just kind of like want to go out and play, do what everyone else is doing. So the way I see it, the more you could turn it into something fun, it is a good way to try and get them engaged. So for me, that was maybe playing with Playmobil or Legos, doing something that I was just naturally interested in, but then finding a way to make that part of my auditory training. I think that was a really strong thing they did. And then just as with kind of like every parent, are being supportive always. They were always my biggest champions, and always had like every ounce of faith that I could do anything I set my mind to, and they just wanted to open doors for me. So having that strength going into it was really important too.
I have to agree very hardcore with Jake because, both my parents are doctors. My mom passed away when I was young, but they were very much from the beginning, I have a twin sister, you will do everything your sister does unless you show us a reason why you can't. And that just never happened. And I think even now, my father is very much, and this is Jane too, never take no for an answer. There is no because you're hearing impaired or deaf. It's not an option. If you can't do it, you can't do it because but we were going to try every single possible method, every single form of technology, every single discussion with a teacher, advocating, anything you can do to make it possible. And to be honest, all these years later, I haven't yet really found something that wasn't possible with all of that effort. So I think I have a 2.5-year-old now, and I think about, being his mom and what he needs, and I'm thankful that he has so far perfectly normal hearing when he wants to, it seems. But I think advocating for your kid when they can't, before they can advocate for themselves, but also teaching them to advocate for themselves. Jane and my dad were very, very adamant about going into school and talking to my teachers, and you heard in the movie about getting a report card about how I wasn't paying attention. But that impacted on me because I learned that I had to advocate for myself. It's the same thing with going into medical school or residency and not being shy about it, even when it's uncomfortable. It's not comfortable to sit in front of a group of people who are all much superior to you and ask them to change the way they do things and ask them for help and to admit that you have a weakness. But I think when you teach your kids and you show them that you stand up for yourself and you advocate for yourself regardless of how uncomfortable it is, that the outcome is so good, it's so much better, and you suffer way less for a short period of time to be uncomfortable than to just struggle. And I think, I think Jake makes a good point about trying to make it fun, but I will say, as Jane said, I was not exactly the most compliant of children. And I am very, very, very grateful as I've gotten older that my parents and Jane were very adamant that I go to speech therapy on a regular basis, despite the fact that I fought them tooth and nail to do it because it wasn't fun. But, looking back, there's a reason why my speech is good, there's a reason why my language is good, because my parents were like, hey, we're going to have some fun, but you're also going to have to do some work. This isn't going to be easy. And so, it's a balance. And I think when you know your child and you know what they will go along with, but making sure that they are doing the things they need to do to really develop the language skills, develop the hearing skills, communication. And that does involve play, and that does involve, doing things that are enjoyable. But yeah, it's just they don't have to be different. They don't have to be different from anybody else unless that comes up. And I don't think it comes up very often.
Amy?
I just want to echo what, Lizzie said. Sometimes, obviously temperament varies in children. Some children are naturally more outspoken. Some children are naturally more confident. And, it's kind of a two-way street. You've got to develop that. You've got to nurture that in your child when they're dealing with a hearing loss. And I will say, we all grew up in New York. I think most of us were pretty independent at an early age just by virtue of having grown up in New York. But as much as my parents taught me to self-advocate and how valuable a skill that is that lasts a lifetime, it was also nice to know that, especially as a young child in a mainstream hearing environment, that sometimes I was tired of it, and my mom would step in, and she would do the talking for me. She did the talking for me a lot, but I started to feel that role. But it was nice to know that she had my back and could catch me when I just wasn't feeling strong and up to it all the time, which I felt like I had to be. But that was a nice thing. And the other thing I wanted to say is, I have a bit of a unique situation because I'm from a deaf family. So, you had my deaf mother talking to me like this to develop my auditory and my speaking skills. And she was a bit of an anomaly in the deaf community, to put it mildly. Not the only one, but a bit of an anomaly. But she grew up orally. My father grew up bilingually, biculturally. So there was perhaps a bit of conflict there. But they made me feel like we will go with this as long as it's successful. If it's not successful, we will try something else. And I was always very grateful for that knowledge.
Anybody else want to say something?
I just want to add, it is noble to think that as a parent you will kind of own that whole process and rehabilitate them to the fullest, but it's also, there's so much to be said about who you invite into that family and that network. For me, people like Jane, Miriam, Megan, Lori, Liz, shout outs. But really though, they're just as much, like a parent in that regard of like my upbringing with hearing. So, yeah.
A really, really good audiologist.
And also a good auditory verbal therapist, and also good teachers. I mean, it's a team effort. This is, it's not something any one of us does alone. We do it as a group. And I was very lucky in all the years, in the many years that I have done this now, and that you all know how old I am. I had a wonderful group of people that I worked with, extraordinary clinicians. It wasn't, they're saying it's me, but it's not only me. It's me and it's a bunch of other fantastic audiologists and teachers and speech language pathologists and auditory verbal therapists who, it's a team. And that's why these kids are great, because there was a team, the star of whom was them, and the next level of stars were their parents. And we only helped them. We help them move along. We have a couple of more questions.
So come Sunday, I will have been the parent of a daughter with a profound hearing loss for 21 years on the button. And you would think I'd be accustomed to it, but I'm still surprised when there's so much that I don't know. And one of the things, for example, that I never considered was the discomfort that, and I thought it was diplomatically put, intimacy can create for kids, young adults with hearing loss. And so I now get these reminders that even as parents, we don't know what it's like to be someone with a hearing loss. What else in your experience do we not know about, at least not yet? Now, I got to tell you, I'm not looking
They're
for
probably not going to tell you.
No. I'm not looking for a stormy story here. But just experientially, what else do you think you've gone through that we're not aware of, just in your experiences as kids and young adults with a hearing loss?
Do any of you want to say something here?
They're older and more mature.
Shazad, go ahead.
One other thing that you probably don't know is that we love to be able to get away with selective hearing. And use that as an excuse.
Do you tell that to your children also, that it's all right for them to have selective hearing, Shazad?
What was that?
Do you?
I didn't hear you.
Do your children have selective hearing?
Children?
Your children?
My children?
They have normal hearing,
I'm
his
not sure
children.
yet. It's a little too late to tell, but yeah.
Anybody else have something you want to add to this?
I think the whole process of sleeping and waking up in the morning is so difficult, and I would like to ask for more empathy from everyone. We rely on, I know for me, a special vibrating alarm clock that goes underneath my mattress and shakes the bed when it's time to wake up. But if I set it wrong or there's daylight savings time and I forgot, I've missed classes, I've missed meetings, I've missed so many things just because that one piece of technology didn't work, and I couldn't have my mom call me, or I couldn't have some other signal alert me to wake up. So this is something I've always really struggled with, and I would love to see more solutions for that out there, especially as somebody who travels a lot and needs to have it with them in different environments.
I think that's a really good point. I think, Jake talked in the movie about technology and sometimes wanting it to feel like not technology. And I think something that's really important for anybody who's with us is we're so independent. Like, all of us are so independent. Like, our cochlear implants and our hearing aids have given us so much independence, but they've also created this incredible dependence. And so when there's a problem with the device, when there's a battery that dies and you don't have an extra, because I certainly am not as good as the lovely gentleman in the film who always has his batteries, it can be really difficult. And having people understand, like, hey, sometimes like I'm in the middle of a case and my battery died and now I've got one ear. And yeah, I can function, but it's really hard. And Jane and I talked earlier today about like I was going on a date the other day and my hearing aid died on the way to the date and I didn't have another one and I was like, what do I do? This is a disaster. But and just things like that of understanding, like, yeah, there's an incredible independence, but there's also a dependence that comes along with kind of being attached to your technology that it can make you feel very vulnerable. And it certainly can make you feel, just there's a weak spot.
Right.
Like, and it's like a little bit of a kryptonite, if you will. And I think that can be really challenging. I think for all of us who up here are very outspoken, independent individuals, it's hard.
Okay, so we're doing this movie. So Lizzie is doing a residency in Los Angeles, and she said, and I wrote to her and said, "Can you come?" So she sends me a text message saying, "I have the weekend off. If you can film me on Saturday, I'll take the red eye on Friday night. You can film me on Saturday, and I'll fly back on Sunday." Yes, Lizzie's coming. She walks in at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning, and she says, "My implant's broken." I'm trying to make a movie about technology, and Lizzie's implant is broken.
I'm just trying to continue my lifetime of torturing her, that's all.
Okay, that's okay. So now I've told all the bad stories about Lizzie. I'm letting her go for the rest of the afternoon. Okay. Wait a minute. There's somebody back there who is ahead of you.
I just wanted to add one more thing too.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I think like unspoken kind of experiences that you're asking about. In the documentary, some of us talked about like acceptance and integration with our peer groups. And something for me that I went through was just, kind of like, you're not accepted by everyone. There are different types of people in the world. Some people who you'll, share a story about a hearing loss, and, they'll think that's the coolest thing, that there's technology to help. But then there are other people who maybe aren't as understanding and, they just don't, they see it as something broken, don't really want to associate with it. And I don't think it's the hearing loss that is really driving that person's decision. It's just the type of people, that exist. And so to, self-reflect on it and to say that, I'm accepted or I'm not accepted because of the hearing loss, no, that's not true. It's, it's that way because the world is composed of different types of people. And, it's like those who mind don't matter, those who matter don't mind. That's the kind of mentality you have to instill.
Okay.
Well, I just wanted to use you guys to give me an answer for this. My daughter's 6, and she wants to go to a sleepover. And I'm just curious, like, what kind of things should we talk to the other parents about beforehand, or even talk to our daughter about? Because I worry about things where, like, when kids are at sleepovers, they don't necessarily go to sleep. They stay up and they talk, so I don't want her to miss out on anything. So
being in the dark is hard. And one of the women in the film talked about it in relation to intimacy, and we're talking about 6-year-old sleepover, very different. But at the same time, it's the same concept. I think all of us, there is some element of lip reading that goes along with this whole process, and so when you take that away, it's difficult and it makes you feel very vulnerable, and it can be really challenging to keep up with the conversation and to keep up with what's going on. So I think specifically in terms of, just like anytime you're thinking about being in the dark, it's something to consider when you're talking about other patients, like parents. Like, maybe there can be a night light, maybe there can be an overhead light, maybe there can be something on that facilitates your daughter being able to see her peers. I know for me also, like, facial expressions are really important. My single word recognition is absolutely terrible, but I'm really good with sentences. I'm really good when you put it into paragraphs. And I'm really good when I can kind of filter all of that also based on the facial expressions and the lip reading. So for me, when I think about sleepovers and I remember my struggles, for me it was being in the dark. The rest of it wasn't as hard.
One of the things that I tell families is get a whole bunch of flashlights And if there are going to be 8 kids at the sleepover, have 8 flashlights.
Yep.
So everybody has a flashlight, and whoever is talking puts the flashlight on their face, so that it just it's a game, but then it lets the child with the hearing loss have visual access in addition to not taking her hearing aids off or her cochlear implant off. Amy,
And
did you want
it's
to?
nice if the kids do it without your daughter having to be the one that initiates that, the parent initiates.
Amy?
I think, I've been in this situation many times where, whether it's educating the teachers, you can educate all you want. They're going to forget. And there are going to be plenty of moments where they're just not going to remember or they don't care. And, with dealing with a young daughter, my daughter is just starting to do sleepovers, so I'm just reminded about all this stuff now. And, there are going to be moments, and she's going to have to deal with it. And you're going to have to help her with that. And be like, there are going to be moments when you don't understand what's going on, and you have to think about how you want to deal with it. You can run through different scenarios with her, and I remember there were moments in various aspects of my life where I found myself retreating because I didn't understand what was going on. And I had to learn to be okay with that sometimes because it's going to happen. The other piece of advice I would give is just, talking to the parents of the host sleepover and being like, you might want to it would be really great if you could just remind your daughter that she might need a little extra light, or, just to coach them a little bit. It's not going to always work 100% of the time, but it'll help. And if your daughter has one particular friend that she's closer with in that group, make sure that she sort of bunks with her. And a lot of my friends did a lot of interpreting or relaying for me. It's just, and that can be a source of help as well.
When I went to sleepovers as a kid, I never took my hearing aids off. I just left them on all night because I was worried that someone would say something. And so I always thought it would be fun if, my parents sent me with maybe, a little box that was decorated and looked nice, and maybe someone else could put their glasses in it, or, we could put it by somebody's jacket or something. Everybody could kind of contribute something to that box. I thought that would have been a really nice way to make me feel comfortable and then also make everyone else in the sleepover feel included in that activity.
One more question.
My name is Margaret, and I've attended this conference not as an audiologist, but an adult that has bilateral cochlear implants. I want to say that the film was outstanding. I work part-time in a school, and I plan to buy it because there's a kindergartner in the school that has bilateral, and I would like to teach the teachers more about what it's like. I'd also like to say that you all are very accomplished and strong and wonderful advocates for people. The last thing I would like to say to all the audiologists in the room is that you need to also know that the needs for children are very different than the needs for the adults. And that's because I lost my hearing as an adult, as most people do. So I grew up hearing and know what it's like to hear and then not hear. So that many things are different in how you advocate for yourself and how you're treated and things like that. And you all talked about advocating. There aren't a lot of people with hearing loss as adults that have learned how to advocate for themselves. And that's what makes it more difficult for adults to get along in the world every day. It's because we don't teach people in the world how to deal with their hearing loss. Many people learn through organizations like HLA, but how about the other 48 million that do not learn because our society doesn't teach people how to help and how to learn with deafness as adults.
Thank you. Thank you all. Please follow the film We hope that you will get the opportunity to see it again and to share it with more and more people. Here comes Donna. Wait a minute.
Thank you to all of you for taking the effort to join us today. And Jane, we wanted to just give you something to remember tonight and to thank you from the American Cochlear Implant Alliance. So we took the invitation, the flyer for the event, and a picture and framed it for you. So I hope it's a happy memory for you.